Welcome to The Current Buzz, the podcast where we break down what's happening now at Oklahoma Electric Cooperative and OEC Fiber and why it matters to you.
Each episode, we're bringing you practical insights, behind-the-scenes conversations, and real-world answers to the questions our members and subscribers are asking. Thanks for tuning in. Let's jump into today's conversation.
All right, welcome to The Current Buzz, episode 64. Today, we are going to talk about solar and what homeowners should know about it.
And we're going to sit down with two amazing members of our engineering team, the real experts, to talk more about this. But first, you know we like to kick off each episode with the three things you need to know.
So Operation Roundup, or ORU as we call it, our foundation, actually surpassed $7 million in donations, thanks to our members' generous contributions since 1993. So this is where your bill gets rounded up to the nearest dollar. Those dollars go into this foundation, and people apply for grant money. So $7 million have been donated. It's pretty awesome.
Impressive.
That's awesome. And it's springtime, and we know we're always digging, planting new things. So don't forget to call Okie 811 before you dig. It could be costly if you hit some kind of utility line under that.
Yep. And then OEC Fiber offers some of the best and most dedicated support for our business subscribers. We offer customized business solutions, dedicated support, and scalable services built to fit your operation. And of course, fast, reliable internet. So no hidden fees, no surprises, just the performance you need to stay connected and competitive. Give us a call at 405-217-6784 to get started today.
So today we welcome Nick Shoemaker, Teddy Whitehead from our system engineering team to the show. And we want to know just a little more about your day-to-day, because I know you work behind the scenes, so you're not really out there answering phone calls. I mean, you are, but you're not really people that members get to see. So walk us behind your day-to-day. Nick, start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So Nick Shoemaker, I'm the manager of system engineering. I oversee our engineering, so our engineers, as well as our GIS, which stands for Geospatial Information Systems, which more easily is all the data that we put into a map so we know where all of our equipment's located. I oversee all the studies we do to make sure that the system is safe, the system is reliable, all the members, all the investments we make sense, that we always have power and room. I also do all of our disaster restoration studies to make sure when inevitably here in Oklahoma something goes wrong, we can get the most amount of people online the quickest. I always say if I do everything right, no one can tell I did anything at all.
It's a good way to look at it.
Definitely.
What about you, Teddy?
So I work in system design, field technician. I've been with the co-op about 10 years. Day to day can range from anything from backfeed scenarios, a load analysis, fielding members' calls they may have about troubleshooting some of their power quality issues, and solar.
And you're working on your electrical engineering degree?
Right, yeah.
Right? It's just a little thing,
little bitty things.
Very cool. I heard that the other day, so it's impressed. Good job, man.
Thanks, man.
So we're going to talk about solar today. So let's just dive in. What happens when somebody puts solar on their home, and how does that interact with the grid?
So typically, when a customer or a member wants to put solar on the house, highly recommend they reach out to OEC first, because we do have a lot of valuable resources at that point. But we can provide the correct documentation, manuals, procedures, guidelines, things like that that'll help them on that journey. But essentially, they're agreeing to put distributed generation on their house or on their property if they want to do a ground mount system to offset their usage of the electricity they're getting from the solar or from the electric company.
So you mentioned distributed generation. That's
Yes.
one of those terms that is very industry specific. I don't think a lot of people really understand what that means. So kind of explain that to us, what that means, how solar fits into that.
So I like to look at distributed generation, or DG, as really just kind of an electrical mix that's available to a party or persons at any given time. That can be wind turbines, solar. It can be a gas-powered generator. These are all generation sources that could be potentially providing electrical.
And this is largely different from the way the grid has worked for the past 90 years. We've always had kind of a centralized generation. So you have a big power plant. It can be any of the big power plants you think of, coal, nuclear, wind. But that energy is generated and is just pushed out, and it goes in one direction to your house, your business, the places that you frequent, and then the energy is used there. With distributed generation, we still have that centralized model, but now there's energy out at where the load profiles are. So they're at your house, at your business. And now energy can be going two ways instead of one way. So it can be coming into your house, but if you're overproducing solar, you're using, the there's more energy from the sun than you're using that particular time, that energy can actually come back out your house and onto the electric grid where we'll deliver it to another membership. So it's the grid's much more dynamic now than it's ever been.
Yeah, it's kind of that's a cool concept that people can now produce power at their house, and if they overproduce, it goes back to us. It's something you'd have never thought of 70 years ago. You know?
Yeah, and it's electricity, so everything happens at the speed of light.
Right, instantaneous. So here's the one we get all the time. Realistically, how much of a bill can solar offset?
I would say what I see generally, by and large for residential, 50 to 75% of an offset is kind of the sweet spot you want to be at, but also what we see financially. It makes sense for the member and the co-op. So by and large, we see that mostly. Not to say that you can't offset up to 100%.
Yeah, so it's important to kind of understand the way bills work, kind of understand how it interacts with the solar. So we kind of have two main components. We have our energy charge, which unsurprisingly is you charge for the amount of energy that you use in a given month. But we also have our service availability charge. So that's the fixed costs that go into running the grid. The pole in your yard doesn't get cheaper or more expensive the more energy that you pass over. It's kind of a fixed charge. Hopefully every month OEC continues to pay my salary, which also doesn't fluctuate with how much energy has been bought, which I appreciate. If you're offsetting those energy charges, that's where you get a lot of the value in solar. But if you're producing more solar than the energy that you use in your billing month, it goes into kind of a different rate because instead of offsetting, we now need to go and sell it to someone else. So it's not an offset, it's now kind of an overproduction that we have to do something with. And that's where that 50 to 75% that Teddy talked about comes from is, the weather in Oklahoma, as we've seen just this week, but over an entire year is very dynamic, very cold to very hot to very mild. So our energy usage month to month is very, very different. And then our solar is also very, very different month to month. So looking a lot at what we call our shoulder months, so that's kind of like those nicer, usually weather months of the spring and fall where bills tend to be lower, but there's still a lot of solar energy out there. So you want to kind of maximize those months, but not overproduce too much energy by building too big of a solar. In general, as people think about finances, every house and every project is individualized, so I'm kind of talking in broad strokes, but that's where we see the most financial bang for the buck come from.
Yeah, I answer some solar questions occasionally. I always tell them for your shoulder months because really you don't have the HVAC, you don't have the heating load.
Exactly.
It's kind of like your base load. This is what you want to offset. Those peaks and valleys you're never going to hit. If you design your solar for those, then you're going to overproduce like you were saying earlier.
Right.
So 50 to 75, I do. That's smart. It's good that we're seeing that.
Yeah, and when we say that different in finance, it's like a third the value to overproduce and sometimes less. When you overproduce, you get whatever the market rate is, and we're in the SPP, the market rate. We simplify it for you, but it's actually very interesting. All energy is bought and sold 24 hours in advance, and prices change every 5 minutes. So the market can be really dynamic depending on what's going on. We give you more of a centralized monthly fee, so you don't have to be watching it like it's a stock ticker. But still, one May, your price might be 3 cents. Another, it could be 5. It could be 2. So there's a lot of ups and downs that have to do with a lot of things outside of your control. But it's generally worth way, way less than the value that you're getting if you're just offsetting.
That 2 to 3 to 5% or 5 cent is how much we would pay for your overproduction.
Correct.
Right.
I just want to be clear on that.
Yeah, we call it the avoided cost rate.
Cost, yep.
Yeah, and so members, anyone can check that on Western Farmer's site. It does, change daily, and you can see that number, like Nick said, go down to 2 cents. I've seen it down to like 0.17 cents a kilowatt hour. So obviously, you're not getting as much bang for your buck, and that just extends that payback period for the member if they're financing it. So just a little bit of protection there.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned how important it is to know what you're looking at on your bill. And we actually had 2 of our billing experts, our senior billing analysts, on the show a few episodes ago, and they broke down each of those, the service availability charge, the power cost, all of that. So go back and watch that if that's something you are interested in. So what role does the roof direction and shading and all of that play, and tree coverage? What role does that play on the solar system?
That is very important when you're deciding to go solar. One of the biggest things in our neck of the woods, we live at, a certain latitude that, you want your solar panels facing a certain direction to kind of maximize your efficiency in generation. And in our neck of the woods, you want those panels facing south. That way, as the sun, as it appears to transit from east to west, you maximize as many sun hours throughout the day. And that's kind of what you're trying to do. So, if you put solar panels on just like, say, the east side of the house, you're going to get generation in the morning to afternoon, but you're going to see that generation kind of, taper down as the day goes on because now sun's on the other side, you're not yielding as much production, and vice versa on the west side. So we like to have the panels facing in the southerly direction in this neck of the woods. The other thing would be trees. Shading are a problem. Something you might not notice when you're setting up solar, though, is that little tree you planted, and then you're putting the solar in. Well, that tree becomes bigger 10 years down the road, and you may just not make it a habit to get out and look around. Like, it's part of my solar system shaded during the day because I notice my generation's going down. So it's a good idea to get out and just make sure that, you don't have any obstructions because you're stealing power from yourself, and ultimately money at that point is going to cost. So
I will say we have a lot of members who, houses point southeast or southwest. If you go completely east or west, you can account for maybe a 10 to 20% reduction in total kilowatt hours that you'll get from the solar. But, for certain accounts that can make sense. Not everyone has a roof where it's able to get it that can point directly south. So some people still do make use out of it, but that is the optimal direction.
So tell me this, if I have solar on my house and the power goes out, does the solar still work?
no.
That's a great question. That's a
Very good question.
huge misconception that people have. I will throw this in for OEC. We've reduced our outages by 75% in the last 12 years. We're the most reliable utility, but we do, like I said, we live in Oklahoma. Lots of things can happen. People will be out of power this year. I can guarantee that. Almost all solar that we have is grid tied. So it uses the grid to operate. So the information actually it gets from OEC is how it runs all the power into your house. And when it loses that, it rapidly shuts down. You can design a project around having backup, but it's going to involve storage, so batteries, and then some other equipment on site. So that really changes the scope of the project. You can also just have batteries without the solar. You can also go something more traditional, like a backup home generator, something like that. So if reliability is important, there's other things you can look at. And, some people get reliability for very small things. Maybe they have some very expensive medicine that they care about backup on. You can get a smaller battery that runs just that refrigerator or whatever, you work from home. You can have a battery that the energy goes through into your computer. So in a blink situation or an outage, you have time to back up your files or finish what you're doing or even work for a couple of hours. So there are some solutions, but try to figure out what you're trying to fix because battery technology is still pretty premium pricing.
Yeah.
And getting closer to the ideal point. But to kind of touch on what Nick was talking about, that the anti-islanding feature is also an important safety measure because, like with a backup generator, for instance, gas powered, when you're backfeeding your panel, for instance, at the house, solar can operate that same way in a world without smart inverters with anti-islanding features. And that is to protect our, property and personnel that are operating on that line. If you do not have that feature and you aren't able to turn those solar panel generation off, that electricity, just like any other generator, will backfeed on the system onto the transformer and push it out on the utility lines where, a line person may not realize it's energized or they think that it's dead. And that creates a very serious hazard. So that's why these things are very important when it comes to grid-tied systems.
Now, what happens if a solar, if it's installed incorrectly?
Definitely getting a good contractor is really, really important. I mean, you're putting electrical generation that can be, relatively high voltage on, inside your house. Like anything inside your house, if anything goes wrong with that, you really run the risk of damage or potentially complete loss of, the most expensive asset that you have. So it's really important to make sure, from a safety standpoint, but also from a reliability standpoint. This is a project that needs to stand up 20, 25, 30 years. So making that good investment early so it's not something that's a constant nuisance. Maybe it's not generating as much as it's supposed to. You're not getting the payback that you would like to. These are large investments. These are tens of thousands of dollars. The quote that I had a door-to-door salesman, the quote that I got for my house, which wasn't that good of an offer, but it was after the payoff of the financing was $60,000.
Wow.
Buys a pretty nice car nowadays. And so it's, you want to make sure that you get somebody that has been doing the work for a while, that has all the correct certifications, that can answer the questions, that make you feel confident that you chose the right person.
And that might be around in 10, 15 years with something he's worked on.
Right.
100%.
Yeah. A 30-year warranty isn't good from a 1-month-old company.
Right. Right. So this might be hard to answer, but maybe what's the average? What would the average size solar system be for a standard house on OEC? I know we have giant houses and little houses. Is there an average that you see?
Yeah, I would say that number is right around 6 to 8 kilowatts.
Okay.
It's going to be your standard residential size solar system going on right now.
What would something like that cost, do you think?
Again, it depends on your contractor, but I've seen numbers from 25K up to 50K.
Oh, wow.
It also depends on tariffs, things like that.
Yeah.
So things that, when the tariffs were implemented, that caused the numbers to go up, spike significantly. A large amount of that was shipping, but raw materials in general were all experiencing those high prices. So, the last, I would say probably 2 to 3 years, there were a little bit of an uptick on like what a system would run you, but that's just the nature of the beast. It follows the market. So
I've always used a good rule of thumb, and I agree with him. About 7 is about the average we have. Creates about, enough to offset if your average usage is 1,000 to 1,200 kilowatts an hour a year, which I believe is about the average for a house for OEC. And I think just a good rule of thumb is $3,000 per kilowatt installed. So, 7 kilowatts be about $21,000 is a good rule of thumb. Again, every project's unique.
Right.
There could be a lot of things going on with it. But if you're really outside the bounds of that, like my quote that I got for my house, which I think wasn't a very good quote, it was about $450. So roughly 50% higher than where I thought something should land. So that right away as my rule of thumb was like, okay, this isn't a good offer. And if I'm still very serious about this, I should maybe get a second or third quote.
Right.
Well, you had said, I think, Teddy, in the beginning that members need to call OEC
Yes.
before doing this. And so we do hear from some members, and some of them are told that their electric bill will completely go away.
yeah.
So what really happens with an electric, is that true?
I will say that is false. I do field several, a lot of calls throughout the year regarding their bill that they get. A member gets a bill and they see that they still have, some kilowatt hours that they required, that they consumed when they weren't generating electricity. So the short answer is that's false. You're still going to get a bill, and the solar company will in no way take over that bill, because I've heard that before. That they thought the solar company was going to assume their bill and they're paying a finance company now. In no way is that true. You will be getting a bill, whether that's paper or email, and you will only be charged based on the consumption, taxes, fees, service availability charge. Sometimes if the member has a security light on their property, all of those things will be on there. And your avoided cost rate, once that kicks in, can chip away at the service availability charge. But at that lower rate, it's very likely that you will eliminate your bill 100%.
Yeah, we have I can think of maybe 1 or 2 members that we have in total that completely zero out their bills. And they're very edge cases. One gentleman has solar, he has a wind turbine, he spent a lot of money, creating a really reliable house. It's something he super focuses on, and he still barely gets to $0 by the end of the year. So I think it's a pretty unrealistic goal, but I also don't think it's something you have to hit for the project to be a success. Like a cost reduction, or not putting all your eggs in one basket. If you think that rates are going to go up, you see a lot of upward pressure on that, and being able to kind of hedge against that, I think, is a lot of what our membership is doing. And of course, there's a lot of our members that do solar for non-financial reasons.
Right. Just the concept of 2 to 3 cents a kilowatt hour to offset the service availability charge. They must be way overproducing to chip away that whole thing. That's
again, that gentleman I've talked to several times, and he knows that, and getting to 0 was more important than the financials of it.
Some people enjoy the warm fuzzy of doing their part and having some sort of energy independence, but doing what they can to reduce overall demand, especially these days. So.
Well, what parts of the electric bill will still remain? So you had mentioned service availability charge, and we kind of touched on what is included in that service availability charge. But what part if you are generating, what part of the solar or what part of the electric bill will still remain?
Yeah. So again, to put a plug back, you should watch where the customer service went
should.
over if you want a full in depth. But your bill will still look exactly the same. Just the numbers on it might change. So if you were going to be at 1,200 kilowatt hours, like our normal OEC house, but you generated 1,200, it's going to show 0 kilowatt hours in the price of whatever our energy is, and then depending on which of our bill selection options that you're on that fit your house best, you'll have that service availability charge, and that'll be there, and then your your taxes and things like that on there. And then if you overproduce, there'll be another line item for that at whatever the cost or whatever our payment for that is, and then that'll subtract from your bill. So again, almost all of our solar members that put in 7 or 8 still have a little overproduction in those spring and fall months when energy prices hopefully it stays 60 all the time, not like now where it's 20 and then 90.
Gotta love Oklahoma.
Yeah, one of those classic cool months where, like you said, not a ton of HVAC, not a lot of other usage. But you'll be getting the same bill as everyone else, just hopefully those numbers read much, much lower based off of the solar that you've invested.
Yeah, there should only be a change of just a couple of line items that you'll see in those information bubbles on the bill. One would be an added one that says, generation. And then you'll see that breakdown on the right for energy credit.
And then one of the most important things is it'll say generation on your bill, and that can be really confusing. So that's how much you generate from our point of view. So your solar is constantly producing, but it's kind of a black box. We have a meter, and we're just measuring everything that's going on in your house. So like I can't tell if your solar, the cloud went away and your solar picked up, or maybe you turned off all the lights in your house. It'll show a drop in usage, but I can't tell what that's from. So we can't tell how much your solar is producing individually. So on our bill, when we say generation, that means, hey, energy is actually flowing out of your house onto OEC. Mm-hmm. So that's a misconception people get their first bill. They're like, hey, it says I'm not generating anything. It's like, no, you're not over generating anything. And that's on a particular hour. So
they might see on their own energy app that they have from like say Enphase. Am I allowed to use?
Sure.
Okay. So like on a product like Enphase, they have an energy app where they can monitor their production. And there are a lot of really responsible, solar members out there that they monitor that like daily. And when they get their bill, they only show, well, you've generated, say, 200 kilowatt hours. Mm-hmm. Well, on their app, they show, say, 2,000. Well, there's a big discrepancy there. And they're like, well, wait a minute, that's not right, because solar hits the house first. Anything you produce, if your house is using electricity, it's going to eat that power up at the moment. So there's nothing touching the meter saying pushing the other direction. So what you see on the bill is what you've overproduced for those moments. Everything else is what you consumed as you were producing it.
I like this little ad to the billing
Yeah.
thing we had the other day. This is a good ad for that episode. So go back and watch that one, and then if you have solar, listen to this one because it's probably very important. You probably get that question quite a bit.
Caesar and I get that question all the time, and it's a good thing. They're looking out for their investment. Mm-hmm. We're just doing our part to hopefully give them the information they need so they better understand it.
The electric grid's very confusing, and
It really
like you
is.
said, if you're still confused after both of these podcasts, like we'll look through your bill with you individually and kind of explain everything. We're your not just your energy company, we're your trusted energy advisor, and we'd love you to help you understand the investment that you made.
Okay, so say we invested in solar. Mm-hmm. What are you seeing as far as how long does it take for you to, pay for itself, for that solar system to make sense?
Midwest, we're seeing about a 12 to 15 year payback period right now. That went up after the expiration of the energy credits back in December 31st, 2025. So that pushed the payback period a little bit longer. So, it's going to take a little longer to pay that off. But by and large, that number's gotten down. And, I'd say about 10 years ago, you're looking at 20, 25 years to pay that off. Whereas today, it's gone down considerably.
Mm-hmm.
I will say, I hate to be the engineer about anything, but it depends. Depends on what you pay for it, right? If you get one at $3,000 a kilowatt, you'll have a quick payback. If you get one at $450, you'll have a very different payback because you just paid more money for the same product. So, that's one of the things you got to take care of. And one of the other things you got to look out for that's sneaky, it's like going to buy a new car nowadays. These companies make as much money off of financing your product as the actual product itself. Mm-hmm. I think a car buying a new car is the exact same example. A lot of the metrics I could pull is they make as much money off the financing as the sale of the car. And it's very similar for solar, and they can stretch it out over 15 years, which can drive the total cost of the product up by 20, 30, is in a lot of cases 50%. So, watching that financing is as important as watching what the total cost of that product is, because they can kind of, someone who's maybe not being as thorough with you, maybe trying to make a sale because they make money off of it, could stretch that. We're getting a really good partner, like we talked about earlier. It's not only about the safety in the install, but walking you through the purchase to make sure you're making the type of purchase that you both need and understand.
And one of the reasons you want to call us first, they'll talk to your team and you can help size the system that they need, right?
Yeah. Now, we won't build a system for anyone because it operates under a different authority having jurisdiction. So, anything downline from the meter is NEC, operated by the rules and regs. For us, the line side of the meter, it's NESC. And so we have a different rules and regs that we operate by. So we don't build it, we don't install it, but we're there to, if we need to calculate, say, the annual usage of a member, because they want to know, I want to do a PV watts calculator and kind of see what I should size my unit or size my solar unit to. And then when they get to the meeting with the solar provider, they have a little bit of knowledge to sit down with, and they're saying, well, you really need a 12 kW system. And, they've got a physical copy of like their usage from us showing that they, a smaller system would suffice. So that way they're not overbuying when they don't need to.
So say I have installed a system on my house. Does that complicate selling the house or the home's value?
So what I've read is that it can actually increase your home sale value, but you may hit some snags with insurance companies depending on how old the system is and whether or not they consider a liability. But what I've read is that you can expect to see anywhere from $6,000 to $8,000 on resale value if it's a properly installed system. So, because it is a perk. If your electric bills are going to maybe be smaller, say you're upgrading the size of the house, that mortgage payment may be a little bit more, but you're going to have lower energy costs ultimately in the end. So it is a perk in some ways.
I would say, though, and I mean, obviously, ask your local licensed realtor on information on that. But I also think it might also narrow the amount of people buying it because, these do reduce, your energy usage. But at the end of the day, you're now producing energy. So each thing that you've installed is now a maintenance item. It's something, even if you have a warranty with it, now you got to go get it fixed, do the troubleshooting, get the people out. And there's going to be some people who probably don't want to deal with that. I kind of think of it like buying a pool. Hey, the pool has value to a lot of people, but some people I do not want to deal with the pool, so I'm not going to buy a house that way. So be something good. And I know some of the housing used to struggle getting comps because Oklahoma didn't have a ton of solar. We do have a little bit more now. I think about 1% of our members have solar on their house. Wow. A little bit more than 1%, like 1.2%. So now it's more active, so that may not be as big of an issue depending on where you live.
So how does net metering or excess generation work with electric co-ops?
So with net metering, I like to think of it as two buckets. You have a consumption bucket and a generation bucket. Ultimately, the short answer is that at the end of that billing cycle, you're only going to be billed on the difference between the two buckets, essentially. So, with solar, it's hitting your house first. We're not going to see that generation, but we're going to bill you on just the net amount of power that you needed to call from us. And that's typically how most net metering schemes work on co-ops. Some are always going to be a little different. But by and large, they're just billing you on that net difference.
Mm-hmm. And if that number's positive, it's like your normal electric bill. You get charged the cost of electricity. If it happens to be exactly zero, then you don't get billed anything on your energy. And if it's negative, we don't bill you for any energy because you've already covered it. And then it's that fluctuating cost month to month that 2 to 4 cents that you'll get credit for, and that will go on your bill and apply to any of the charges that are going to be on that bill.
Well, we're going to switch gears and address specifically some myths that we hear surrounding at-home solar. And one of them is something that people often hear in sales pitches, and we've kind of touched on it. But solar means I won't have an electric bill anymore. So what's the reality?
The reality is if you're connected to us, you're going to get a bill from us. Almost none of our members, a very, very small amount, have a $0 bill at the end of the month. During some of the lower billing period months, you might get one or two, so that maybe 20% of our membership does, but for most of the installs that our members have, the goal isn't $0. The goal is the best ROI on the money they spent on their solar. So they will still get some sort of a bill from us.
Next myth, bigger solar systems are always better. So why oversizing systems may not provide the benefit people think?
Back to the financial part of it. If you oversize it, you may not be getting that same return on the investment. So bigger is not always better in this situation because you may have spent much more on a system that you're not yielding any sort of return on, and that energy just goes back on the grid. So,
okay, the next one is one we've heard that the electric company doesn't want people to install solar. So why do utilities actually want solar done safely and correctly?
Yeah, so for the rates that we have at OEC, we've broken it up between our fixed costs, which we have to cover, all the things that we install, all the employees that we have, and then our energy costs. So it really decouples you getting solar or not. It makes no economic difference to us whether you have it or not. It's just a personal decision you have to make. So we have a whole team that'll kind of guide you through the process, give you the most information to make the correct decision for you. But through that, we want to make sure that this install is going to be safe for you. It's going to be safe for our system because you're going to be pushing energy onto it. And it's going to be safe for our hardworking linemen who are going to be out working on the line, making sure that a line isn't energized when it's not supposed to be.
All right, so I want to talk a little bit about solar farms. Say I have a good chunk of land and I think there's some money and maybe I put a solar farm. Is there anything OEC does for that?
That's a great question. So everything we've talked about is we have kind of two sizing parameters in which whatever one kicks in first. So the first is you can put in solar 125% as large as the largest hour of use that you have in a year, up to 300 kW. So
that's not confusing at all.
I know. That's
how do you figure that?
That's why you need to call in, and we'll give you those numbers. Yeah, so it is a little confusing, but in general, it keeps the size of the project that you're putting in pretty close to whatever the load is. So up to 300 could be like a Walmart or something like that. But these solar farms can be megawatts or hundreds or thousands of megawatts. They're completely different projects, and they actually kind of fall out of the purview of OEC. So OEC is a distribution energy company. So we take energy from the greater U.S. grid and deliver it to your house. The next step up is generation and transmission. So that's those really big towers, and then generation is all the power plants. And that's actually another cooperative that we use for that service, Western Farmers Electric Cooperative. And they're the ones who are going to initiate solar farms. They do huge studies for it. They'll put out RFPs, all those types of things, but that all goes through them. We're not allowed to build our own solar farms.
Say a member is ready to make the jump. They've purchased, they're ready to go. What's the process like for them? What do they do?
So the process is fairly streamlined. We try to make it as streamlined as possible for the members. So, they've called in, they've met with the solar provider, or they're DIYing it. They will call back in and get the information. They can email us at solar.okcoop.org. The application. So the short form application will detail their location, the electrical contractor if they're using one, system size, a general description of what they're going to be doing. We also ask that they provide a plan set if possible. So a site plan laying out where the solar panels are going to be going, where their main distribution panel, utility meter, and all that stuff are going to be located. Also include a one line that gives us how that is going to interconnect into our electrical service. So we want to be able to see that they're not, for instance, they're not putting in a PV meter base in between the utility meter. We use bidirectional solar meters, so we only need one utility meter base. Some other electrical companies, they have two different meter bases. So this is where we would catch all that kind of information when we process that application. If we see that if we see that there, something needs to be corrected, we'll kick it back out for amendment, or let them know that the system's too large. They'll send it back. Once we approve it, that's when installation can begin on the project. We won't hear back from the member or the solar provider until installation is complete, and at that point, we'll ask them to provide a couple photos. That way, we can see that the service is installed properly, that there's no PV meter base installed, before we mobilize a metering technician to go put a meter. So like I said, once we get that and the permitting, so like a past inspection, we'll turn that loose to metering department. They'll go out and set the new solar meter. Once that's been done, we will issue the permission to operate, or the PTO. And from that point, they're able to start getting the benefits of solar.
You kind of touched on it. I wanted to ask, what permits or approvals are required before that system can operate?
So each city will have their own city supplement. They all have to abide by a certain set of national code. But most cities have a solar permit. Most larger cities, some of the smaller cities, I think Pink doesn't require them anymore. But most of the cities within our service territory do require a solar permit, which will require an inspection and a licensed electrician to do that work.
We're going to hop into like a lightning round. So we're going to have some quick questions and get some quick answers on. So I'm going to start with what's the biggest misconception people have about rooftop solar?
I think the two misconceptions are that it's going to keep your power on when you lose the utility power, which isn't the case unless you specially design that in with a much more expensive project, and that it's going to always reduce your bill to zero. For us, almost no members reduce theirs to zero, but they still have very successful solar projects.
What's one thing salespeople sometimes leave out when they're trying to sell a member or just a member?
I would say for me, it's the special equipment charge on the meter. As we were talking with that bidirectional meters, solar meter, it goes both ways, right? So it's going to measure power back and forth. The meter that they currently have on their house, all we do is charge the difference between the two meters. So once they get the PTO, there will be a special equipment charge that they will see on that bill the next billing cycle. That is a one-time fee that goes on there just to cover the cost of the two different meters the meter that we swapped out. So that is probably the most common thing that we see. It's an unexpected charge that they did not or were not told about. We do have that in the procedures and guidelines manual, which is why we always ask, give us a call so we can go over these things, because more than likely they'll get missed.
All right. If someone is considering solar tomorrow, what's the very first thing they need to do?
They should contact OEC and talk to our renewable energy specialist. We'll walk you through your bill. We'll walk you through the process. We'll try to answer any questions we have for you. You can do it if you're thinking about solar. You can do it once you've selected a vendor. And then you can even do it afterwards as you start to get your bills and perhaps have questions about it. We're always here to help. We're your trusted energy advisor.
So for one more time, what's that email address? solar@okcoop.org?
Yes, solar@okcoop.org.
Okay, well, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, it was very informational. Members are going to find it very helpful. Thank you.
Enjoy it.
Before we take off, we have a couple more things to share with you.
So we have electrical engineers here, and we've talked about safety and solar. So I'm going to talk a little bit about electric safety. So we actually have a live line demonstration here at OEC that I take around actually and do a lot of stuff for first responders. I've done it for school kids or just, a civic organization. But basically I take out a trailer and we energize this line to high voltage and just talk about scene safety and the best way to address if you encounter a car hitting a pole or you see down power lines. And I tell you that live line demonstration just really gets people's attention. I think it's a great tool we have, but that's something we promote out there.
It's an excellent tool. Having witnessed it, it's pretty cool.
It really gets your attention.
Yeah, absolutely does.
And if you want to bring it to your place of business or first responder, fire department or whatever, go to okcoop.org/liveline,
Yep.
I believe.
Yep.
Also, we highlight a community event each month or on each episode because we are huge supporters of communities throughout our 7-county service area. And on this episode, we are highlighting lots of military appreciation events that are happening throughout the month of May because it's Military Appreciation Month. So we are sponsoring a Moore Chamber of Commerce Military Appreciation Lunch. We have one at Newcastle. Also, that one specifically is May 26th at 11:45 a.m. at the Newcastle Library. But we appreciate all of our military, current and former personnel. So thank you for your service.
Yeah, I just want to thank you all for joining us today. Thanks for being on here, guys. Thank you all for listening, and we'll catch you next time on The Current Buzz.